So technically, when you look at this commandment, you could look at it from a legal, technical thing and say it's about how people testify in court. And it is. But I think holistically, it's also about these three things: what's in your head, what's in your heart, and what's in your walk.
Right. They're absolutely pretending that they can offer communion with God without facing the truth that you're a slave to sin. Like that's really what they do. It's just the message is it's total acceptance. God, he just accepts you as you are, and that's it. That's the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what Jesus does. Jesus says, could anyone here condemn you? No, then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. He does deal with the sin. He won't let you out of that reality.
Welcome to Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. I'm Timothy.
And I'm Caleb.
And you're listening to Bible Discussions, the forum where we explore biblical topics that are relevant to your life. Today we're continuing our series on the 10 Commandments, and we're going to be looking in this episode at the 9th commandment, you shall not give false testimony. Now, I guess we could just reword this as don't lie, but
we could, but God didn't.
So that would be lying.
Yeah.
But there are some reasons why that's an oversimplification. For instance, I think we'll see that this commandment can be tied to the legal system technically, as bearing false witness in court, and it's also kind of a uniquely human sin, that only human beings speak verbally, and so only we can say lie verbally in word and write down in literally a lie.
Or by false witness
in
court.
Yeah, we're the only ones that have court system.
Maybe they call it parrot or something.
Yeah. So now I would start, like many of you, if you've been following us, you may notice that there's often a hat hanging back on the wall behind Caleb. That's my hat. I hang there. Usually it's either the Eagles or the Phillies hat. And so it was the Eagles all the way through to the world or to the Super Bowl championship. So it's going to be the Phillies hat all the way to the World Series championship.
Yeah.
But right now, see, I can make the statement that the Phillies are undefeated during the regular season of 2025 baseball season because
so we're half of the teams.
Yesterday was opening day and we won. So
yeah.
But hopefully that won't be a lie by the time you see this. This episode will drop in about 9 days.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll still be undefeated. But it may not be true, but it's not lying because today they are undefeated. All right. So let's begin by reading the commandment. And again, it's the exact same commandment in Exodus 20, verse 16, and Deuteronomy 5, verse 20. And it says, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. So
it's like twice as long as the last three.
Man. Well, the next one's not the same. So we'll have to read two different commands out of different versions. But all right. So, but please, let's not start by asking, who is my neighbor? Because that's a totally different question that comes from Jesus' ministry, but we'll deal with that later. But right now we want to focus in on the lying and false testimony part and what they mean. So I would say that fundamentally, right, this commandment is about how we use our words and how we approach the truth. So even though the commandment's about don't lie, it's really about the truth.
Yeah. It's about sort of reality. Lying is kind of trying to twist reality or someone else's perception of reality to your advantage.
Yeah, or even lie to yourself about what reality is to where you get, you're living a lie.
Yeah, because you refuse to accept it. And it's like I've heard Jordan Peterson say from his experience as a clinical therapist. He's like, every time I see somebody try to twist the fabric of reality, it never works. It always snaps back on them.
Yeah,
and it's worse than before if they would have just not done that.
Well, and not lying isn't just a rule, right? It's like a commitment to the truth. Mm-hmm. It's like a commitment to community, to your community, to the people that you know and love and live with. If you break your commitment to the truth and start lying, well, you're going to break community also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I think we talked about this last time. It's harder to build up trust than to break it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So community has to be, any kind of society has to be founded on trust, on on truth.
Yeah, I hadn't planned to talk about this, but when you said it that way, it made me think of Stephen Covey's book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about in there how you have an account that you build up with people. You know, you can make deposits or you can make withdrawals,
Mm.
and so you spend a whole lot of time building up your account with somebody by making deposits, and then you do something stupid like lie to them, and it's like big withdrawal.
Yeah.
But hopefully you got enough in there to survive the withdrawal, depending on how large it is. And basically, if you keep a positive account with somebody, you have a good
Well,
relationship.
that goes back to that parable of the shrewd manager.
Yeah.
Didn't we talk about that last week
Yeah.
too?
Not last. Well, yeah, a little bit last
Yeah.
week, but several weeks ago as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he decides to change his investments from financial to human
Yes.
investments, invest in relationships so that he can rely on the people when he's about to lose his job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and again, if you lie to people all the time, you're going to make so many withdrawals that you're going to break community. You're not going to have a lot of friends. Well,
They
there's
should
a,
make a story about that, like a boy who keeps crying something and then nobody believes him. I don't know what that would.
you don't want to say the word wolf for some reason.
I'm pretending that I'm inventing it right now.
Okay.
Because we always do that. We say, yeah, Moses watched Biblocus. Where did he get all this stuff?
That would be like a form of lying.
Yeah.
Pretending that you made up. All right. So yes, lying, famous in story, like the boy that cried wolf, and it's codified in Scripture. And there's a beautiful psalm that talks about being committed to truth, and it's Psalm 15 verses 1-5.
Lord, who may dwell in your sacred tent? Who may live on your holy mountain? The one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue utters no slander, who does no wrong to a neighbor, and casts no slur on others, who despises a vile person, but honors those who fear the Lord, who keeps an oath even when it hurts, and does not change their mind, who lends money to the poor without interest, who does not accept a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things will never be shaken.
So about 80-90% of that was all about telling the truth.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, or some version of slander, gossip, slurs.
Yeah, rumor has it that David was going to be a guest on Biblocus, and so he wrote this psalm for his appearance on Biblocus podcast.
Well, it sounds like you're spreading a rumor. So
1000 BC. So anyway, yes, but David wrote this psalm. He was obviously thinking about the same topic that we're discussing today, and it covers most of the things you could say with your mouth. But like it says at the very beginning of the psalm, in case you missed it, it's about community, right? Because he says, "Who may dwell in your sacred tents, and who may live on your holy mountain?" So it's about living in community with God, living in community with all the other believers of God, all the other people of Israel.
right. I mean, think about the first thing Adam and Eve do, right? They've been able to walk with God in the garden. Then they sin, and He comes down and they hide themselves.
Yeah,
right.
Because it was stealing, like we talked about last episode, and it was also lying. Like oh, it was the woman you gave me, and
When you feel shame or guilt, like you instinctively try to withdraw. I think you try to isolate yourself from community with others or with God.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about this psalm is it talks about 3 things that I wanted to emphasize, and they're the key, I think, to understanding this commandment. And the first one is, as it says in verse 4, it's about what's inside of your head, right? Because he says, who keeps an oath even when it hurts and does not change their mind?
Who despises a vile person or honors those who fear the Lord? What your opinion is of them?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like you're not going to lie about what you're thinking, like what you know to be true. Like you're not going to change your mind just to kind of like make the facts sound better for you, or whatever, and to get
like,
out of an oath or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like you can say or do things that are false, but you always know. It's like when people are arguing about beliefs. You can't just decide, oh, I'll just believe the other thing.
Yeah.
I'll just try I'll just try religion if I'm an atheist just to see if it's true because you're not believing it, you know.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
you can picture what he's saying here is like, well, you're going to keep an oath even if it hurts. Like even if later you go, "Ah, man, I wish I had never said that." And so instead of going, "I never said that." Like I think all of us have been with somebody when that happened.
Yeah.
Like they promised you something and then you're standing in a group of people with them and you say, "Oh, well, remember you said you would do this?" And they go, I never told you that." And you're like, "What?"
Yeah.
But you see it in movies and stuff all the time
Mhm.
too, where somebody just lies on somebody, and then they're just like, "I can't believe you did that to me." And everybody watching the movie knows the truth because they've seen the whole movie up to that point, and they know the person's lying. Well, when you're living it in real life, you know the person's lying too, and you're like, "Oh, what are they doing to me?"
Especially if it's you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're lying too. That's the whole thing about it. It's like you're deciding, you're making a choice, and that gets us to the other 2 points I was going to make. So the first one is it's about what's in your head and what you know is true. A second one is it's about what's in your heart and why or whether you value the truth.
Mhm.
Because he talks about it in verse 2. He talks about um, and the third thing is it's about your walk. It's about how you manifest the truth, and both of those are discussed in verse 2. So I wanted to mention that before I read it. So the one whose walk is blameless, who does what is righteous, who speaks the truth from their heart
Yeah. So it's heart, mind, and body
and
living it out.
actions. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're trying to unify them all, and they're all in communion. When all three of those are in concordance with each other, then you can have true communion with other people. You don't have the person going, "Wait, why are you lying on me right now?"
Yeah. If you've ever been to a Lutheran church, a Lutheran service, and a lot of them, one of the first things they'll do in the service is confession. Like everyone confesses together, and depending on what, because you could, you could have different versions, but a common one is everyone will say, "I've sinned against you in word, thought, and in deed by what I've done and left undone," and it's like right there, all those word, thought, and deeds, everything in
Mm-hmm.
unison, because you can lie, internally. Maybe no one else knows it, but you know it. You can lie in what you say or in what you do.
Well, and so lying is misrepresenting what you know about the truth, maybe to protect the other two.
Yeah.
Like well, if I tell them the truth about what I really did, then they'll know I'm not really the nice person that I'm
Yeah.
pretending to be. And so, or if I tell a lie about where I was, maybe they won't be able to prove that I'm the one that committed the crime,
Hmm.
or whatever. So you're trying to hide your actions by telling lies with your mouth.
Yeah.
So
I'll
this,
tell a story on my daughter when she was
Mhm.
really little, like not really verbal much yet, but pretty mobile. She was splashing in the dog's water bowl in the kitchen, and we have like one of those open wall kind of windows between the kitchen and the living room, and I was out of view, so I come walking back and look into the kitchen, and she's running away from it and looking at me like, I'm all the way over here, so I couldn't have been doing doing that. She can't say a thing, but her actions were they were false, you know.
Yeah.
And we've all done that. I mean, if you're at work, and you hear the boss coming, you're I'm definitely doing something, you know.
Yeah.
I gotta look busy.
Yeah, the Alt Tab switch
Yeah.
away from the web browser over to the word processor or
Yeah.
spreadsheet or
Or you
something.
have that face that you put on and you walk a little faster, so it's like, oh, he's definitely going to do something important.
Hmm. Or the other awkward thing is when you're having a conversation with somebody about somebody else and they come walking down the hallway and you're sitting there going, "Hey, hey, they're coming."
Yeah.
Hey, so you shout the person's name out, "Caleb, hey," so that the
Yeah.
other person goes, "Oh."
Yeah, we do this like without even thinking. It's like an instinct that we have to lie and to protect our lies and put these different kinds of lies in the balance with each other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we want true communion with people, then we have to bring this into alignment. These three things, our thoughts and our motivations of our heart and our actions.
Yeah.
You know,
Because it's not true
it's
community or communion with, like, if, when Caleb's coming down the hall and suddenly you're like, oh, hey, Caleb, how's it going? And as soon as he's gone, I hate that guy. Like, that's
yeah, that's
there's
right.
no real relationship there.
Yeah. So lying, right, is when we use words to alter the truth, and that's something we should never do.
Yeah.
We should be committed to the truth. And that kind of gets back around too to the what I said earlier about the use of this commandment that you shouldn't bear false witness in a legal setting.
Right.
And so I wanted to read quickly Deuteronomy 17 verse 6, which says, "On the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses a man shall be put to death, but no one shall be put to death on the testimony of only one witness. The hands of the witnesses must be the first in putting him to death, and then the hands of all the people. You must purge the evil from among you."
Yeah. So I think maybe the most notable thing in there is the hands of the witnesses must be the first, because for them, the usual method of execution would be stoning. So, in other words, if you're going to testify against this guy, you better put your money where your mouth is. You're throwing the first stone, in other words,
Yeah, the people that
literally.
testify
Yeah.
are the ones that have to throw the first stones,
Yeah.
but then the people who do it along with them are saying, "No, we acknowledge that we believe these guys are telling the truth."
hmm
And
Yeah.
yeah,
So, we when we were talking last night, getting ready for this, you were mentioning how justice has to be blind, right?
hmm
And
hmm
that's part of what this is saying. Like justice has to be fair. It doesn't matter if if you know the guy, you probably shouldn't be involved in making the judgment. If you either hate him or love him, because you'll try to, you know, get him in trouble or get him out of trouble.
hmm
And here it requires, they want to be sure, not just one witness, multiple witnesses.
yeah,
That's God's law for the nation of Israel. So yeah, that is getting back to the way that it's worded in the commandment, right? Is bearing false witness, puts
hmm
a more of a legal setting on it as well.
Well, yeah, it's exactly like our legal system in the United States, which is based on these teachings, because you have witnesses that you bring into court to testify, and then you have jurors who look at it and say, in
hmm
the case of death penalty, um, we're supposed to do it without a reasonable doubt, right?
hmm
So if there's one person who's like, "I'm not throwing a rock,"
Yeah,
then you have to say, "Wait, we something's screwy here. Why
yeah,
does that one person believe that they can't throw the rock?"
and that's also why they vet the jurors, because you need to make sure that they're of sound mind, because it needs
Yeah.
to be a reasonable doubt, not
Mhm.
oh yeah, that's Harry, he lives in a tree out by the park. It's like, he thinks the robins are government agents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So technically, when you look at this commandment, you could look at it from a legal, technical thing and say it's about how people testify in court. And it is. But I think holistically, it's also about these 3 things: what's in your head, what's in your heart, and what's in your walk.
Right. All right. So going back to kind of the more social implications of the command, away from the legal, right? One of the things that this law is doing is God's giving you a guide to how to protect your own good name, your reputation, right? He gives you the gift of a name and identity. And we were talking about, that idea of like having a sort of a balance of an account of trust with somebody. If you
Mhm.
have a good reputation, then people trust you, right? Versus a bad reputation, nobody trusts you. And there are two really sharp, really strong verses from Proverbs that talk about this, both in the positive light and the negative light of a good or bad reputation.
Yeah. Proverbs 22, verse 1 says, "A good name is more desirable than riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold." And then Proverbs 25:18 says, "Like a club or a sword or a sharp arrow is one who gives false testimony against a neighbor."
Yeah, that was fascinating to me. I saw in the 25:18 verse, it's basically making slander equal to murder here, equal to violence.
hmm
It's like, hey,
hmm
why don't you just stab him with a sword if you're if you're gonna bear false witness against him?
Yeah, and we saw the same thing a couple episodes ago in our adultery episode where it said that the man who hates and divorces his wife, it commits violence
Yeah,
against her. So a lot of these commandments, even though they're not murder, they have the same effect on a person that it destroys them.
yeah. It's like I forget. I just thought of this right now. I don't remember. I think it's Proverbs 26, because for some reason most of my favorite proverbs are from there. where it says that wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. And it's like, yeah, a friend will tell you a harsh truth. If you got your feelings hurt from somebody you trust, probably they're right, and you're doing something dumb. But if somebody's buttering you up, they're lying. They're
Well,
willing to lie to you and try to build you up in a false way because they don't actually have your best interest at heart.
that's another way we need to be committed to the truth is that when someone tells us the truth of something we're doing wrong, then we need to be open to that. Um, I know that, even in Jesus, in the setting where he was ministering and teaching, they were always trying to catch him in something and, call him a liar. And we'll look at some of that later. But, that's not being open to the truth. When somebody brings you a true statement from God, like Christ did, and he's bringing the truth from the Father, and you don't accept it, then you're not accepting the one that sent him either.
Yeah. So now on the flip side of that, though, having a good reputation is more valuable than vast wealth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. No one esteems a liar. So even if you build your kingdom, your riches by being a liar and a cheat, nobody's going to respect that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Because you could have that taken away from you by some kind of happenstance, right?
mhm.
But like no tornado can knock down your good name.
Yeah,
If it knocks down
it's
all your property, then well, if you have a good reputation, then somebody's going to want to take you in and take care of you because you've helped them out.
everybody wants money, and we talked about that last episode when we were talking about um, not stealing. Right? We were saying how money's valuable. Everybody wants it, and so some people are willing to take it. But see, if you're willing to earn it by cheating and lying to other people, right? Then are you really rich? You're not as rich as the honest person who has a good name and has friends. All right, so I got a question for Caleb since you're the official Biblocus
Yeah,
historian.
you didn't introduce me that way.
No, I haven't. Not yet. I just did. Okay, so I read in preparation for this that Augustine said something along the lines of you can't justify lying even if it would ensure that your child would enjoy eternal bliss in heaven and be saved from eternal fires of hell, that there would be no justification forever to lie, even if it saved your kid from hell, heaven, for heaven and from hell. Now, I wondered, since you're the official historian, you've been following everything here at Biblocus, what is the fallacy of this line of thinking that that any regular listener of Biblocus would easily be able to avoid this trick question?
Well, one thing I hope that anyone who's followed most of our episodes would think as soon as they hear the word child or parent is they'll go straight to the Shema,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So if you were bringing up your child with the Shema, then that's the best way to ensure that they get eternal communion with God. If you've
Mm-hmm.
neglected that, and then you think, when they're 18, you got to lie to them, and that's going to save them, then well, that's the wrong approach,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're supposed to be teaching, I'm supposed to be teaching you and modeling before you, right, the best way to live your life. And
Mhm.
if I'm modeling, oh, well, see, somebody promised me that if I tell this lie, Caleb gets to go to heaven. That's not even how you get to go to heaven.
Right. Yeah.
That I do some trick,
Yeah.
trick statement, some magic incantation by telling a lie that Caleb can be saved. That doesn't even make sense.
It reminds me of Satan telling Jesus, "I'll give all of the kingdoms of
Mhm.
the world to you if you bow down and worship me."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Jesus doesn't do it because that's not the way.
That's
That's
right.
not the way to do it. It's also though for him that's a temptation to avoid the cross
Mhm.
because it's saying you don't have to go through all that. I'll just give up. I'll quit if you just bow down to me. and
Yeah.
and for us, it's actually the same temptation because, like you were saying, or you're not saved by my some kind of trick that I can pull. I go to the dean and we were old buddies, so I get you into the admissions even though you
Mhm.
didn't quite qualify. Not that that's ever happened. um,
Well,
but we get there by the grace provided by Christ on the cross.
yeah.
And so any other way of trying to get there, whether by something that you do yourself that
Mhm.
your parents do for you or something is false.
Yeah. Yeah. And so also, if you've been following along closely, And we looked in Jeremiah when we studied Jeremiah 31, and we also looked in Ezekiel where he says this same thing. And we'll look at Jeremiah 31, 29 through 34, because it has a lot to say about everything we've been talking about. But here it says, in those days, people will no longer say, the parents have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. Instead, everyone will die for their own sin. Whoever eats sour grapes, their own teeth will be set on edge. So that's basically saying that, parents are responsible for their own salvation. Children are responsible for their own salvation. So there isn't a way in which I can secure your salvation on my own, right? Except for the practice of the Shema and try to teach you everything that's right.
Yeah.
But then it continues and says, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. So this is actually the old covenant where the 10 commandments are that we're studying. Mm-hmm. So this is that he's saying this is going to be better than, the commandment, don't bear false witness. So verse 33 he says, this is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more.
That actually reminds me of Psalm 1 there at the end, where it's talking about that, because getting back to emphasizing that communion with God, where he says they'll no longer try to have to teach their neighbor or say to one another, know the Lord, because they will know me. And when we did our study on Psalm 1, we were looking at that Hebrew poetry, the setup and then kind of the subverted expectations. It talks about the man who's rooted on the word of God being like a tree by flowing water, and the wicked being like chaff blown away by the wind. And then it said, which kind of I thought counteracted the expectation a little bit, that not that the man who studies the word of God carefully will know the Lord, but that the Lord knows him. It was kind of like a little switcheroo, because it's more about, it's not just like the raw knowledge that he's getting from studying. It's the communion with God.
Well, and also, just like Psalm 15 that we just read, because when we were looking at verse 33, it said, I will put my law in their minds and in their hearts, and they'll all be doing the right thing. You won't even have to teach somebody. So you'll have mind, heart, and actions all in community with each other there, in Congress together. So yes, if you know the scriptures, right, then you won't fall into these pitfalls, trick questions, like these logical fallacies of, oh well, was it okay to lie if it saves my daughter from hell? It's like, well, that's not exactly how that works, right?
Yeah.
And that's some of the things that actually the 10 Commandments that we've talked about.
Jesus said the truth will set you free, not a lie.
Yeah. And also God told us don't use his name in vain, like special incantations and things. We can't control what God does. We can't say, oh yeah, if I do this for you, will you save my daughter? I mean, it's like.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always thought about with Job's story, where he's offering sacrifices on his children's behalf.
Yeah.
And then it's tempting. Some people teach it as if he was righteous and blameless before, and this just kind of happened to him, and then he's righteous and blameless all throughout. I think he actually has a lot to learn, because he's sacrificing for them. He's kind of doing that, attempting to do that.
Yeah. Well, but now Job was living in a time when he didn't have the law either. He didn't have a lot of the benefit of Scripture that.
But he also, it may just be like an ancient Hebrew kind of fable.
Yeah. Notice though, in this passage from Jeremiah in Psalm 15, right, that there's a match between what's inside of you and what's outside of you. And that's what you're getting to when you talk about the truth and you talk about lying, is internally you have a conscience. You know what you witnessed, you know what you did, you know what the truth is. And so if you choose to obfuscate, if you choose to lie and try to alter everyone else's perception of that by telling false statements, then that's wrong.
Mhm. So here's a long passage with Jesus talking about truth and falsehood from John 8. Um, and this is he's kind of debating with some Jews here. So John 8:31 through 47. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They answered him, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?" Jesus replied, "Very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin." So that's everybody. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me because you have no room for my word. I am telling you what I have seen in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you have heard from your father, from your father. Abraham is our father, they answered. If you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, then you would do what Abraham did. As it is, you are looking for a way to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do such things. You are doing the works of your own father. We are not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear is that you do not belong to God.
So I love in that story how they start out saying that they're believers in Jesus. And then when it gets tough, they're like, we're Abraham's children. You can't call us slaves.
Yeah.
And then he's like, no, you're not Abraham's children because you don't do what Abraham does. And you go, oh, okay, well, we're God's children. It's like, they're already changing their story.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, he's like, okay, because you lied and tried to claim two different fathers, you're really your father is the father of all lies,
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the progression in the story is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And then again, the emphasis there is that they do not belong to God. And he talks about a slave not being a permanent member of the family in the household, but a son is, right?
Hmm.
So again, if they would tell the truth, they could be in him as he's in the Father and be in communion with God,
Yeah.
but they won't they can't even hear it because I like that play with language there. He's like, why is my language not clear to you? You don't even speak my language because you
The
don't
truth.
speak the truth. You speak in the language of lies like the devil.
Yeah, it is interesting that what tripped them up is not liking what they heard from Jesus. And all he said to them was that they were slaves.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we've never been slaves. It's like, wait, do you not even know the history of Israelite people? I mean, they started out as slaves.
Yeah.
They weren't even a nation until they were brought
Well,
out of slavery.
what he emphasizes is that they're in slavery to sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which and anyone, these people definitely seem to be slaves to their pride, I think.
But on every level, they had been slaves.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense that they bristle at being called a slave. And if they were in tune with their own history and with their own sinfulness, they would have acknowledged that they were slaves. Um, and that wouldn't really have been a problem to acknowledge it because, the first step in fixing any problem is acknowledging it, right?
Yeah, but we always want to get the goods without any of the. We want the fruit without any of the thorns. I've quoted. It's just going to become one of my mottos on here. That line from The Office. I do want all the credit and none of the blame. Like they want to get the communion with God without facing the harsh truth of the fact that they're slaves to sin.
It just goes to reemphasize what I've been talking about for several weeks now is when you get to a teaching of Jesus, the part that bothers you the most is his point.
This
And
brings up something I wanted to touch on. about like the state of the church today in the West. We're constantly in decline. It seems like sometimes one denomination will swell, but they're all overall just going down. And you know, why is that? And some people will talk about what do we do for church growth, and some churches have clearly made their strategy to be to appeal to the culture, and some make it to be even harsher on on the culture. And I don't think those either of those are the right approach. Like, you just look at the ones that are shrinking the fastest are all of the denominations that have just fully accepted the culture's view on sexuality and abortion and women's ordination and so forth. And they're absolutely pretending that they can offer communion with God without facing the truth that you're a slave to sin. Like, that's really what they do. It's just the message is it's total acceptance. God, He just accepts you as you are, and that's it. That's the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what Jesus does. Jesus says, could anyone here condemn you? No, then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. He does deal with the sin. He won't let you out of that reality. As like He wants to save you from it. He wants to set you free. So the freedom, the communion, the mercy, all that is true, but they're trying to soften it by ignoring the sin aspect. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why they're shrinking, because they don't actually deal with the real problem that everyone's facing, which is that they're a slave. They don't want to say that because and people get offended when they hear it often. And then on the flip side, you have churches. I think this was the more traditional approach for the last few hundred years, who like to preach, sinners in the hands of an angry God, hellfire and brimstone. And it's like, okay, so we talked about earlier about how justice is important. I mean, this command was given as a part of their legal system. So certainly God's concerned with justice. He's concerned with punishing wrongdoing, right? And making restitution for those who are wronged. But where's the mercy in all that? Where's the communion in any of that? It's like God just wants to pound you into the dust. So
Yeah.
I think it's really, really important as Christians that we need to confess this rightly. Like I love to bring up Psalm 32 all the time and talk about how anything that you say that's true is a confession, because confession means to say with. We're saying it with God. That starts with acknowledging our sin. It also includes acknowledging His mercy to us, and then glorifying His greatness. Like, all of that has to be happening at the same time. And if you try to cut one out because it makes you uncomfortable for one reason or another, then you're no longer telling the truth. So I think we've got to, as a church, as at the end of my little rant here, as the church in the West, we need to be doing all of that. We need to bring the justice and the mercy because of the love and the greatness of God. All of that working in concert. Just like, we're saying here, you got to tell the truth in thought, word, and deed, in your mind and heart, all at once. You can't just use some of them to kind of cover up the lie that you're telling yourself or that you've told one person.
Well, and Jesus started this whole section here by saying, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." And that's a beautiful statement. And that was actually what they took issue with.
Yeah.
That was
They don't
that was
wanna,
a
yeah.
hey, I can't be set free because I'm not a slave.
Well,
And
again, look at what our
it's
culture does. Like,
Mhm.
it's so much of an emphasis on liberty. It's more libertinism at this point. It's just the so-called freedom to just do whatever the heck I want in the moment.
Mhm.
It's like, that's never. If you actually go back, study a lot of people say, "Oh, the Enlightenment has failed," but if you go back and read like what the founding fathers of our country said, what the Enlightenment philosophers that they drew on most heavily, like John Locke, and then even theologians that they were drawing on, the understanding of liberty to them meant pursuing virtue. If you couldn't choose to do the right thing, then you weren't free. If you're addicted to alcohol or any sin that you're enslaved to, you're not free.
Mhm.
So saying, but we've completely flipped that on its head and say, well, this is what I want to do right now, and if anybody stops me from doing it, then they're inhibiting my freedoms. And that's not how it was meant to be seen. So we do the exact same thing today. Jesus says, "I can free you. Free me from what? I'm free." Because see, I already do whatever I want to do.
Well, like we want the community without the truth.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to go on to say in John chapter 10 that he's the good shepherd. And he actually says that he's the door to the pen
Mm-hmm.
that opens to let you out into the pasture to go enjoy freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have the security of being in the sheepfold,
Yeah.
being in the pen there too. So, but Jesus gives you both. He gives you security and he gives you freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But these folks, when they heard him talk about freedom, they took issue with the fact that he was saying, well, you need to be freed. And they're like, no, we don't.
Yeah.
So you can't even come to terms with the truth. You have to know the truth that you're in bondage to sin and that you need to be freed from it, which is what Caleb's basically talking about. You can't just say, oh, I'm not bound to sin in any way. I'm just happy and free. And I love being that way with Jesus too, and it's like, no, you have to acknowledge your need for his forgiveness.
Or in the other direction, because we'd love to overcorrect in the other direction. They just forget about the fact that he does want you.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, stop sinning. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's not the full story.
Right. Yeah. It's not, we're not lost in our sin because of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
We're not subjected to the punishment of sin because we have the freedom in Christ to escape it.
Yeah.
And that allows us to truly live. It reminds me, whenever I hear John 8, and you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. It reminds me, I've shared this once before on the podcast, but I was interviewing for a campus ministry job at UVA that I didn't get. And they gave us a tour of the campus, the regular university tour. And there was a college student giving the tour. And we went to the old law school, and it's got written up on the top of it, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free, in Greek. And out in front of the school, there's a statue called Blind Homer and his student guide, I think is what it says. Yeah, Blind Homer and student guide. And the tour guide that was showing it to us said, oh yeah, this statue's called Blind Homer and his guide, but it originally was meant to be David being anointed by Samuel, but they changed the name of it because it was religious. And then he was telling us that, and he'd already told us, oh, does anybody know what this says in Greek up here? And several people had said, oh, you'll know the truth and truth will set you free. And then he told us that story, and I was like, well, that's kind of ironic.
Yeah, they're hiding the true meaning of the artwork.
Yeah,
there.
right in front of the engraved Greek saying of Christ.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we said earlier we get back to talking about who is my neighbor, because this commandment says, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. And so it might be easy to justify ourselves by saying, oh, well, that guy's not my neighbor. So that happened once before. We're just going to read the introduction to this story, a Good Samaritan. But Luke 10, verses 25 through 29 says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law, he replied. How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. Which, by the way, that was the Shema at the beginning there.
Yeah.
But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And then, of course, Jesus goes into the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, we're not going to read it. Hopefully everyone's familiar with that one. I think even a lot of non-Christians are familiar with that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's interesting. He says, you've answered correctly. Mm-hmm. So he spoke the right words. What's the problem?
Yeah,
that his heart and mind are not on board.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the train to salvation over there. That's it. You're like, yeah, you're right. So why are you sitting on the bench?
Yeah.
Get over there.
Your actions aren't in line with the things that you know in your head and your heart to be true. There's something in there that's out of line with all that, and you're not acting it out because you don't really love Samaritans.
Yeah.
For instance. And so you're
trying
to limit you're trying to limit the people you have to practice truth with because it's too difficult because of your prejudices or bigotry or whatever it might be.
I think that obviously the the parable has a lot of applications, but as an answer to the guy's question, "Who's my neighbor?" It's anybody who's in your path, who comes across your path,
Mm-hmm.
because the other guys, the priest and the Levite, are just walking on the road and they avoid the guy. And the Samaritan stops and helps him, but he came across all of their paths. So just anybody that you encounter, pretty much.
Yeah. But the other things that were in the guy's path were the truth.
Yeah,
The truth is that God created everybody, and so everybody has inherent worth.
I like
And
how
so it's
G.K. Chesterton says that God chooses your neighbors. You might choose the neighborhood, but God chooses the neighbors that are in it, and you don't get to pick. You just have to get along with them.
yeah, we have this tendency when we hear a commandment like that we want to figure out what's the escape clause. Like, when do I not have to do this? Like, we're not even talking about it, but that's the big thing that people talk about online about don't bear false witness and don't lie. It's like, well, there are times when it's okay to lie, right? Like if the Nazis knock on my door and ask me if I have Jews in the attic, and it's like, okay, so you're just wanting to be silly, like, because I mean, even though that's a valid question, it's like we want to approach it from the side. Well, when can I lie? Because I like lying.
Yeah.
It's like
It's the
no,
wrong question.
yeah,
It's kind of like, I mean, that might even be sort of the question this teacher is asking Jesus: "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" We often approach it that way. Um, you know, what's the bare minimum I have to do? Like,
yep,
where's the line? And
mm-hmm,
I'll just get one notch above that.
mm-hmm,
It's like the question should be, how do I get in communion with you? What's in my way?
mm-hmm.
What am I doing, or what obstacles are there that we need to clear out of the way so we can be in communion?
Yeah.
It's not a bare minimum thing. God's not up there like, look at all these C minuses.
Yeah, we always want to approach the commandments from the wrong side of the line,
Yeah.
or we want to stay on this side and just stick our foot over it a
Yeah,
little bit, try out the waters.
what should impress us is how far he went to be in communion with us. He left the 99 sheep and went after the one lost sheep.
Hmm.
And
Well,
and
he made himself neighbors with us,
yeah.
and so like just the word neighbor itself implies community,
Mhm.
and so we should be in community with everybody we encounter.
Yep.
So,
So, let's do another good Pharisee story here.
all right, so Jesus, this is Jesus on legalism and lying.
So Matthew 15, 1 through 20. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, "Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Jesus replied, "And why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is quote unquote devoted to God, they are not to honor their father or mother with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites! Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules." Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen and understand. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them." Then the disciples came to him and asked, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this?" And he replied, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them, they are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit." Peter said, "Explain the parable to us." "Are you still so dull?" Jesus asked them. "Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them."
So I thought it was really cool in the beginning of this that Jesus talks about like, what's in the heart and the mind. And he talks about how they're hypocrites, right? Because
Mhm.
they are not honoring him. They honor with their lips, but not with what they do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so there's that dichotomy between what you're doing and what you're thinking and what you know and what you want to do. Like there's not an alignment there, and so they're out of whack with the truth. So it's just like we've been talking about since we started and since we read Psalm 15.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely. And then at the end there, out of the heart come all these things, and I believe we read this exact verse probably in the or maybe one of Paul's lists like this in the introduction to the Ten Commandments series. He basically just lists breaking every possible
Hmm.
commandment here: murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. That's something that defiles a person.
Yeah.
So lying or bearing false witness is what defiles you.
Yeah. Yeah. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, this commandment. Don't bear false witness against your neighbor. And we now know that everyone you meet is your neighbor, and then the lying defiles you. We know it hurts them. We talked about that. Like it's like stabbing them with an arrow, or
Yeah, might as well,
it. Yeah.
commit murder.
Hmm.
And it comes up in a list here. It comes up in Paul makes similar lists, and they've always got these terrible sins right next to lying. And we like to think of a little white lie never hurt anybody, but
Yeah.
I mean, look at where it leads. We'll go to Revelation real quick. A couple of short verses. The first one's chapter 14, verse 5. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and the Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. They followed the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. So they're not defiled and they're not liars, right?
Yeah.
And they have the name of the Son and the Father. They're in communion with God. What's the alternative in Revelation 21:8? But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, they will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death.
Yeah. So the lake of fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also thought earlier about you like to tell what Pap's description of hell was like, right?
Yeah.
Because you basically described it earlier about you're gossiping about somebody and then they come walking in the room.
Yes. Yeah. My dad used to say that he thought that the, who knows what heaven and hell are really like, but he conceptualized it for his own purposes. It's like he felt like it would be that feeling you get when you're talking about somebody behind their back and they walk up behind you and you turn and see them. It's kind of like
Just
uh,
that sinking feeling
yeah,
stretched out for
eternity.
eternity. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like Peter when the cock crowed and Jesus turned and looked at him.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean that's like one of the worst feelings. And it really pairs well with the lying or the truth telling, right? The slander, the false witness.
Hmm. Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't thought about it. But my thoughts on Peter when he denies Christ 3 times. I actually think well of Peter for what he was trying to do that night. I think was he thought, okay, Jesus told me I would deny him, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go there. I'll even die for him like he promised to do. So he thought, I'm supposed to have a big showdown with the big guys, with
Yeah.
Caiaphas or somebody important, right?
Well, yeah.
And so he was like, I gotta get in there so I can face down the big guys and I'll show Jesus. I'll even die for him. But before he could get to the moment where he met the high priest or somebody important,
It's like a
right?
servant woman in the courtyard.
Yeah, he runs into these little people that if he doesn't lie to them, he's gonna get kicked out of there, and he's not gonna get his big chance on the big stage.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he is the only one, as far as we can tell, maybe John,
John got him in, I think.
to follow Jesus. Yeah, the rest of them scatter.
Yeah,
And yeah, but it goes back to that Augustine story you were telling.
Mhm.
Oh, I can save him if I just lie. It's like,
yeah,
no,
Mhm.
it just like the temptation of the devil, right?
yeah,
To avoid the cross. Like, no, we have to go through the cross. That's the only way.
yeah. And so Peter does the 3 meaningless lies, and then he realizes what Jesus said about me has already come true,
Mhm.
and I've already failed. So then he goes out and weeps bitterly. So that's that defilement. He realized he was defiled. But the good news for Peter was that he waited 3 days and gets to talk to Christ again. Judas, who defiled himself, he didn't wait.
Yeah, I mean, they all defiled themselves, right? They all fled, betrayed him and neglected him, or denied him.
Yeah. So bearing false witness, there's a prohibition in the 10 Commandments, and like we said, we feel like the 10 Commandments would solve a lot of the problems in our community if we would just practice them. And we see that this one is a real community breaker or a real community maker.
Yeah.
If you practice it, you'll preserve community, which was our whole thesis.
And when you break it, you destroy the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got our 10 words takeaway. I almost messed up. Caleb's been telling me that's not 10 words. So I've tried to make every one of them 10 words long now. But originally it was the 10 words in quotes takeaway, because the 10 Commandments is the Decalogue, or the 10 words.
Yeah.
So we have a 10 words takeaway. Now, since we started, we also have a negative one and a positive one every week.
Yeah.
So here's our 10 words takeaway negative version. When we lie, we defile ourselves and hurt other people.
Or positively, communion is being truthful in your thoughts, words, and deeds.
Yeah. So on the negative one, I thought that was kind of a thing we discovered with the adultery episode, where, hating and divorcing your wife commits violence against her. And in here we saw in that Proverbs 25, I think it was,
About it's equal to violence.
Yes, stabbing somebody with an arrow or a spear or whatever. And so, you're actually doing violence to people. So it's worse than, you might think it's just a little white lie, but it's actually damaging.
Yeah, I don't think we appreciate how much our sin hurts ourselves and others,
Yeah.
We always think of it as, that's just between me and God, but it's not.
Right.
It's not. It's destroying the community. It's hurting everybody around you. In the Brothers Karamazov,
especially yourself.
Brothers Karamazov, which is maybe the best book ever written, the best book ever read by me, because I haven't read them all, believe it or not. There's because it's set in Russia, there's an Orthodox monk who's on his deathbed, and he's kind of giving his last advice to all the other brothers around him when he's dying. And he says, you have to take personal responsibility for everybody's sin around you. Like, that's the only way to build the community, to fix the community. You have to treat all sin as all your fault, and it's all, because it's all affecting everybody. So you have a responsibility to do something about it.
Well, that's kind of like the Deuteronomy 17 that we read, that's related directly to this commandment, that you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses before you can condemn someone to death, never on just one person's witness, and then everyone has to participate in the capital punishment.
Because if there had been a sin, it would have affected everybody.
Yeah. Interesting. So, all right. Well, then the positive takeaway, that we talked about there, the communion that you have when you get your internal life aligned with the external world of truth.
Because it all has to be, thought, word, and deed have to be in concert.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and God is truth, right? God and everything that He's created is God's truth. And we have to get ourselves in alignment with God and the created order, which is what the Bible tries to help us do from page 1. It tries to tell us that's why the Bible tells us God's the creator, right? Not so we can understand the scientific way in which the universe, came about and the earth was formed and all those things. It doesn't try to teach us science. I mean, even though there's a lot of science there that you can divine from it, but it's really trying to get our psychology right. It's trying to tell us, hey, there's a created order out here. It was created by God. It was created for you, and you're supposed to make it better by being the steward of it. And you have to be in concert with it in truth. So that it's so our insides can match our outsides. We have to understand who God is, who we are, and what He's made, and how we interact with it. And that includes all the other people.
Yep.
So, all right. So then being in truth with God and being in communion with Him, we also need to be truthful with other people and build community with the people around us.
That's
And-
a description of a healthy church right there.
And we always try to encourage everybody to join a church if you don't already go to one, and start practicing being truthful, with a group of other people who are committed to the truth. All right, well, he's Caleb and I'm Timothy, and thank you for listening to Bible discussions on Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. Please consider subscribing to our channel to help support our efforts. All scripture quotations, unless otherwise indicated, are taken from the Holy Bible New International Version, NIV, copyright by Biblica, Inc., used by permission of Zondervan, all rights reserved. This program is copyright 2025 by Timothy Klingerman. God bless all of you.